What's up, everybody? It's Tommy Two Tits here. Welcome back to Lore Lords episode 6, where we're finally, after long requesting from me, talking about Squid Game. That's right, everybody. Once again, you're wrong. We're talking about Final Fantasy 14. God damn it. I'm fucking out of here.
Squid Game might be next week for Halloween.
Oh, I'd be down with that.
That was sarcasm. We're not going to do a Squid Games episode, Tommy.
You're gonna get Tom. Yeah, we're never gonna do it.
It's not gonna happen. It's just not enough.
It's not enough. Yeah, we have so much other stuff to talk about. Squid Game's great. It's great.
It's great. But today,
it's great.
We're talking about Final Fantasy 14. And the reason why I was actually always planning on doing this Final Fantasy 14 episode, but I decided to do it a lot sooner this time because of. Everyone started playing Final Fantasy 14, and everyone in our communities of streamers, people bought the game just to play with us. People have server transferred just to play with us. Multiple streamers communities have come together into a free company in Final Fantasy 14, and you can catch it being streamed on Twitch on this channel here, Atlas669. It's being streamed on Pat Weston's channel.
Hello.
That guy. Yeah, him. It's being streamed on the Doll Cake channel. And
literally last night, yep.
And other friends like Yura Mateo streaming it all the time.
All the time.
A lot of people.
It's a hot game. It's a hot commodity.
Yeah,
people are playing it.
It's exploding. It's exploding in popularity right now. It's having a big, weird explosion before the new expansion comes out, which is strange. Usually that's when it happens. It's just kind of finding its way to becoming the biggest MMO out there. And if you don't understand anything about Final Fantasy, it is called Final Fantasy 14, but it is not It's not like a sequel series where you have to play 13 games. Each game is entirely its own entry. So you don't need to worry about that. Pat, for example, here, never played Final Fantasy before.
Never, ever.
And now you're starting with 14. And how does it feel? Do you feel lost?
I mean, there's a lot of dialogue that I've definitely skipped over because I'm like, this is too much reading. But I like it a lot.
Yeah, and everything I'm going to talk about tonight is basically events that happened before that, as well as just the world map. A couple places in the world map, the timeline leading up to the beginning. It's all spoiler free. I would say up to like level 20, and that doesn't matter. Like nothing up to level 20 is important.
It's true.
I'm going to talk about things you're going to find out in the beginning of the game, like in the tutorial stages, like level 15, level 16, whatever. That's teaching how to play. So I don't really consider it a spoiler. It's something that's going to affect your gameplay at all. In fact, it might help you because you'll have a better understanding of it when it does happen.
I'm level 36, and it's now getting interesting a little bit.
Yeah, and if you play a couple hours every day, you can get to level 20 easily. Like in a couple of days, like it's easy to get there.
They did that on purpose because they clearly wanted you to be like, hey, we have a lot of other content. Keep going.
Yeah, they recently increased the amount of experience you get by the main story quest in the low levels just to get people through it faster at the beginning parts.
Yeah, it's really, and I appreciate it too because like. I'm not a big MMO guy. I don't really. I've tried playing WoW back in the day. I tried playing Star Wars. What is it? The Old Republic. I tried playing. What else have I tried playing? RuneScape. I've played RuneScape, and I'm like, I just can't get super into any of them. Not that I don't see the value, and not that I don't have fun, but like in terms of like longevity, I'm like, I'll play this for like a couple days or weeks, and then I won't play it again. With Final Fantasy, I'm like, no. This has got a lot of story to it. This has got like a lot of fun things to work up to because like right now I'm working up on my monk class and I'm very excited about it and I love the techniques that I'm learning. So it's like it makes me want to continue leveling up because normally I don't really normally leveling up just gets you stronger, and it does in this game too, but they reward you so frequently yet like just they make you really fight for it to get new techniques and stuff like that, and it's really nice.
Yeah, and nothing is unobtainable. Everything you see in this game is a goal you can reach, and I really like that. It's like if coming from someone who's basically like a lifelong WoW veteran, I can tell you that I was playing the game from 2004 until 2020, right? So I've played a lot of World of Warcraft, and I can tell you that you'll see things, and it's just like that's never gonna happen. I don't have the time in my life. I don't have to dedicate my entire life to do that. Final Fantasy 14 is not like that at all. You can get things, anything you want, you can pretty much get to. And another thing I want to point out is this is all about the lore today, and nothing I'm saying you need to know before playing the game. This is all just fluff. It's going to help you understand stuff. So my point number 1 was, do you need to know this before playing? No. Point number 2, this is spoiler free. I'm not going to be spoiling things further in the story. So if you're here and listening to this and maybe say things in chat while I'm live, don't spoil the story. And also, things I say here, the view that you have on them may shift through the story. Some things may be proven to not be true that I'm saying in this thing. Like, things change. So I am ignoring all of that. I'm doing this as if you just started the game. And I've broken it up into 5 parts to try to help it stay coherent. This is a Square Enix story, so it is absolutely insane. But I'm going to actually start off first with what is called aetherology, which is a word you will hear quite a bit in the story. This is something you see mentioned by a lot of the main characters, specifically the characters known as the Scions of Seventh Dawn. And it is the study of aether, and you'll hear the word aether a lot. And I'm starting with this because it ties directly to the timeline of events and how it's measured. Basically, this is to show you how to explain elemental forces in the world. And there's a chart, actually, right here that I found online, which is very convenient to help you know what it means. And what it doesn't show on this chart, which I meant to edit beforehand, I completely forgot, is it actually is divided in half. And this is a chart that shows the 5-way pattern of elements, and there's 2 halves. The top 3 are the astral elements. The bottom 3 are the umbral elements. Astral associated with light and means active. Umbral associated with darkness and means passive. You'll hear in game a lot, you probably already have, people reference the like, for example, the 3rd umbral era.
Yeah.
The 6th astral calamity. Things like that.
Yeah.
These are referring to the timeline, which is measured by the umbral and astral system. The astral elements are wind, lightning, and fire. The umbral elements are ice, water, and earth. And lightning, for example, is lightning, wind, and fire are the active elements. So lightning being a storm or a lightning bolt, wind being a powerful tornado, and fire, of course, just being fire, are very active things. Water, a calm pond or a quiet flowing river. Ice is just like a stagnant iceberg, while earth is like a mountainscape that's just unmoving in the distance. Each element is important to the world because, like I just said, everything about how they're passive and active is also a complete lie. It makes no sense. So already going back on what I said, obviously, water doesn't have to be passive. There's such things as typhoons and floods. Ice can be a blizzard. Earth can be an earthquake.
Yeah.
Wind can be just like a cool breeze. Fire can be like embers, and lightning can be like the charge of a battery.
Yeah.
So there's a passive and an active to each of these elements. They just simply break the chart up that way in its most common form.
And it's also like a good way to kind of, trick people. And some people need to live their lives more actively. I'm making a metaphor out of this.
Yeah. Also, the idea of astral being light and umbral being dark is something that's a whole nother, could be an entire another topic that we're not going to get into, also for spoiler reasons. But you will see, for reasons of this being a Square Enix game, they say the word light and dark a lot, and it's very important, and more will be gleamed on that later, because you won't see the word light and dark a lot in this whole lore story, really.
Sure.
But yes, there is the umbral and the astral, and those are words you're going to see a lot. And also, just to be clarified, you see these lines on this chart? Yeah. That's like super effectiveness.
So so it's like fire. That makes sense.
Yeah, fire beats ice beats wind, And it goes back and forth in multiple ways and shapes too as well. It's not that simple, of course, but that's the basic chart, the 5-way like little pentagram of aetherology. Elements can also mix together. Like fire and ice can be a hot spring.
Yeah.
Water and earth can be like a bog,
That's cool.
Yeah. And aetherologists probably really only have a base understanding of trying to understand things because of how much we've already gone back on each other. Sure. But a good thing, another important thing to know is that in the world, the aether is like everywhere in the land, and its balance is important. And when things start to go out of balance, effects happening. One of the most common is the appearance of sprites, which you've probably also seen in game. Like they're like weird lightning shapes moving around, or like fireballs moving around. So these are elementals that are formed out of a crystal base, like a solid physical crystal that's formed from too much fire aether in an area. For example, like in the desert starting area, you see fire elementals because there's too much fire aether in the land, which makes it a desert.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing, and it can be very bad if it's done too much. There's an entire area that you will see more about called the burn, which is what happens when aether is going way too whack, and it's basically just flats of nothingness for as far as you can see.
Jeez.
And in the expansion Shadowbringers, you learn a lot more, but I am not going to touch that at all. That's for you to find out. And now that's part 1 done. Part 2 is the world and aether. And the first thing to talk about is a word you've already heard if you started the game and made your character, which is the word Hydaelyn. Hydaelyn is a name, and you're going to hear it a lot. And unfortunately, it has 2 drastically different meanings.
Oh, great.
One of which is Hydaelyn, the crystal you met, the mother crystal. You were talking to her, the giant and floating in space. She's a godlike entity, and it's basically the god of light. And she's seen as a kind of floating blue crystal in like your mindscape. And you interact with her a couple times in the game. And you meet her very early on.
Yeah, I remember floating up to her.
Yeah, I think it's like level 5 or something. And you're told that you're her champion and you have this power called the Echo. And you'll learn more about the Echo as you go on. But basically the gist of it is you can see other people's memories. Which happens a lot in the story. And that's all I'll say about that to avoid spoilers for further things about the Echo. But the other meaning of Hydaelyn is the planet. Hydaelyn is the name of the planet the game takes place on. So sometimes you will see people refer to, all the places of Hydaelyn, for example. They're talking about all the places around the world. And as the game progresses, they stop saying that, I think, pretty much to stop the confusion, because it'd be like Christians in our world calling the earth Jesus. Like it doesn't make a lot. It's weird. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's confusing, and they start instead saying the word the star. So if you also hear the phrase the star, they're not talking about the sun. They're talking about the planet we're on. They'll say like all the people of the star. That's like what that means. All the people of the world, because they can't say the word earth because that's an element, and that would get even more confusing. So it's just the star. And aether, that we talked about before, is basically the Force in Star Wars. Almost literally, except it's just divided into elements. But as it's where magic comes from, and it's also what people's souls are made of. And it's everywhere within you, within others, connecting all things, just like Star Wars and the Force.
Got it, yes.
And you can physically see it as crystals, which you guys have, I know you've seen plenty of times in games where you go and you attune to them. You fast travel between them. That's called the Aethernet and the Aetherite, which is basically just teleportation crystals. And you'll see the massive, small crystals you find by doing gathering professions in game. Like you cut down a tree, you can get wood, like earth crystals from wood, that kind of stuff. And it's used for crafting, making magic items, jewelry, and even furniture and stuff like that to imbue them with magical elemental properties. And in the part of the world where the game mostly focuses on is called Eorzea. And you've probably heard that word a lot as well. That is the continent the game takes place on, kind of. We'll get more into that in a second. People in the Eorzea worship beings known as the 12. Do you remember when you made your character and had to pick a god?
Yeah.
So those are the 12. There's 12 select gods that are different, quote-unquote human deities that we honestly don't know almost anything about. And for the record, that's not going to come up ever in the game, what you chose. It is never going to be relevant. It's never talked about. I don't know why it's an option, but it's a thing. And also, when I talk about humanity or humans for the rest of this lore thing, it's all the species.
Right. I kind of assumed. Like,
they say that in the game. That's why humans aren't called humans. They're called Hyur. Hyur. Because humanity is used in the game to refer to all sentient species.
Yeah, I kind of figured that one already.
Yeah, because characters would be like, "Oh, like that's not humanitarian or something like that." In game, they'll say that, but it just means in all species. There's not really like racism in the game. It's kind of like moved past that point.
Right. That's nice. What a world.
Yeah, amazing that in a world with that many species, they could just get over it.
Yeah, right.
But then there's
especially
beasts.
with ones like drastically different sizes.
There's beastmen though, and people don't like them. Like the Eorzea I saw that are the lizard men. Which is our next topic. I'm actually just about to start talking about. So the 12 deities known as the 12 are worshipped by the human creatures, but beastmen, which are more animal kind of species, like the Eorzea I just mentioned, who are lizard men, as they're known by the common tongue, worship a deity known as Ifrit. Now, Ifrit is the first primal fight in the game, and what I mean by primal fight is he is a creature known as a primal, which is also a form of god. And these gods are summoned using the crystals I mentioned earlier that are solid aether. When you gather enough of them up and cast a powerful enough summoning spell, your god becomes a physical creature. And when they show up in the physical plane, these primals have an effect called tempering. This is important to remember. When a primal shows up, anyone around them becomes tempered to them, which means they're like mind slaves to them. And their entire goal in life now is the worshipping, and if he dies, the resurrection and the resummoning of his primal. And they'll even kill their entire family to do so.
Jeez.
And they mention in the story when you first encounter tempering that there's no cure for it, and the only thing to do is to kill the people who are tempered. There's no other way to go beyond that.
That's fucking brutal.
And that's basically what you need to know for what we're going to talk about going forward. Primals are summoned by crystals. They're very dangerous. Aether is all the elements. And now we're going to talk about the world map, which is part 3.
Right.
But because before we can get in the timeline, we have to talk a little bit about geography. And I'm going to bring up the map.
This is one of my favorite parts.
On stream for this. Here it is. There's the map. This is actually in Microsoft Paint because I'm going to be drawing on the map.
Woohoo!
And let me just move my window around here. Move this around, change the size of
the
that.
Garlean Empire really,
here.
they really hate seeing the sun.
We're gonna move this around. How's that look on OBS? Did that change? Yeah, it did, but that's fine. It's fine.
It's actually easier to read now.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm gonna zoom out. Oh, jeez, it's not that far.
Yeah.
All right, that's it. I don't need to zoom in yet. So just this is the shape of the world, and this is what we see in game when we look at the world map. You can see a big part of it is clouded. I believe we're going to see that unclouded in Endwalker, the upcoming expansion. But we know a little bit of what's back there, and there's 3 continents. Well, 5 continents in the world. But firstly, of these 5 continents, the big 3 are Aldenard, which you can see written here. Which I'm going to get a bigger line. Let's do thick red lines. Thick red lines. There's Aldenard in the red circle there. And to its east is Ilzabard, which is right there, where you can see the Garlean Empire. And to that east is Authard. Those are the 3 big continents. And that's where the game mostly takes place. And Authard is the first one we're going to talk about. And we're going to go back. We're going to start on the east and go west to get back to where this game you guys know more about. Yeah. So this is Authard. And in the game, it is known as the Far East. And as you can see, there's phoenixes, there's giant turtles, there's dragons and stuff. And this first island we're going to talk about is Koshu, known as Hingashi as well. This island of Hingashi is Japan.
Oh.
It is very much an analog to Japan directly. And you can see right here, we have... I lost my circles. This is Hingashi, this whole island set. And you see where it says Kugane right here. This is the capital of this Japan analog. You can even see there's like a Mount Fuji right there. Kugane is the trade port to the Far East. It kind of controls most of the trade in this entire section of the world. It is one of the only places in the entire Hingashi we've seen in game. We haven't even been to this upper Mount Fuji island like at all, except for little tiny coastal regions. So we don't know much of what it looks like. But it is Japan. It's a Japanese analog. Everything's very relevant. It's where the samurai come from.
Okay.
And they're run by a shogunate government. Again, Japan.
Like very much Empire, Japan. Like.
Yeah, and their history goes all the way back to the ancient Allegan Empire, which we're going to talk more about the ancient Allegan Empire soon. You've probably already seen that phrase in game a couple times. It's a very important part of the history that we're going to get into. But just for the record of that, it reached this far. This is how far it reached. But yeah, we don't know much about that. And next we have Eorzea right here, and this area right here, and its capital of Doma right inside. This is an analog to China. It is everything there looks extremely Chinese. If you've played Final Fantasy VI, you can recognize the name Doma, which is a direct reference to that. And its capital is just known as Doma Castle in game. I don't know what it's actually called. But they live on this giant river that's supposed to be the Yellow River. And to their north is the Azim Steppe. And the Azim Steppe is the Mongolian analog. And this is where the lizard people in the game, called the Aura, come from. Just there's a fun fact there. They're all from
racist,
Mongolia.
Like they're trying to say something about that.
I mean, we could go deep into that. And yeah, so there's Doma. That's China part. That's what we need to know about that much.
Yeah.
And the last region, like nation, I guess, of Othard is Dalmasca, which is down here. Dalmasca isn't really an analog to a direct country as much as another Final Fantasy game, Final Fantasy XII. It is a giant desert and jungle-like area that connects directly to Ilzabard. If you've played Final Fantasy XII or Tactics, you will recognize almost everything there when you have to visit it. It is extremely referential. Again, you don't have to play it to understand anything going on, but it's just all the names are reused, characters are reused, even the looks of the characters are reused. And next, we're going to go to Ilzabard in the middle, which, as you can see here, is clouded almost entirely, except for actually only two spots. One, Big Daddy Garlemald with the Garlean Empire, which you've seen in game from the get-go. They even have little images here of their little spaceships, basically, flying around. They're not spaceships, they're just airships. But they are the big bad dudes. And then down here is the nation of Thavnir, and its capital of Radz-at-Han, which is something we have not seen yet, but we have seen from the trailers and the announcements. It is going to be a big feature of Endwalker, the upcoming expansion. And all we know about Thavnir is that it is an independent, complete independent nation that has been independent from Garlemald the entire time because they're strictly neutral and have a full neutral policy. They will not interact with anybody.
Wow.
And so that's why we also don't know about it. And they look-wise, they seem like almost like a mix of Aztec and like India.
Oh, that's cool.
Almost like a mix of both of them. There's a Beastman tribe unique to that island that are elephant people, which makes me think India, but then they show the city and it looks very Aztec. So
right,
maybe a little bit of both.
I'm down.
And now, last but not least, and probably a little bit the most confusing, is Aldernard. Because I already said earlier it's called Eorzea. But it's actually called Aldernard because it is a situation that is like Britain and England. That's the best way to put it. So Aldernard is Britain. Eorzea is England. So there's this island up here where we're going to start off first called Old Charley. And it's actually known as the Old World. That's what this is known as.
What a tiny, tiny little island.
Yes. And the island, there's the Isle of Ham instead of the Isle of Man, literally just reversed. It already only even looks like kind of like England. And Old Charlayan is a nation you get referenced at the very beginning, which is one of my favorite parts about Final Fantasy XIV, is the continuity. Old Charlayan is the first referenced nation outside of Eorzea in the game. Most of the protagonists come from there. They're a group, the Silence of Seventh Dawn are made up of a group of people called the Scholars of Baldesion, which are a group of graduates from Charlayan. And Charlayan is a nation of scholars and academics who just hoard knowledge from history and also the land in their giant fortress and never let anybody learn about it unless they need to. They're ruled by a group called the Forum, and outside of that, that's pretty much all we know. Again, it is an area going to be shown for the first time in Endwalker, even though it is mentioned basically from level 5. You're going to start hearing the word Old Charlayan or Old Charlayan or Charlay, and you're going to keep hearing the name over and over and over again.
Are we going to go? So that's where we're going to go in
the newest expansion. It's the first area we go to is Old Charlayan.
That's going to be cool.
And I've already seen what it looks like. It looks gorgeous. It's very Roman. It's all very Roman looking, like ancient Rome.
Well, that's cool. That's supposed to be really old, so...
Yeah, it's the old world. That's where they come from, and the people then went to Eorzea, which is everything down here is considered to be Eorzea. And we're going to start off with the nation of Ishgard, because it's the first one up the top. Ishgard, we saw a little bit last night on Dullcake Stream, in the land of Korathos, which you see right beneath it. It is the frozen wastelands of the north of Eorzea. Ishgard is a nation run by a theocracy called the Holy See of Ishgard. It is all about religion, worshipping specifically the god, I think Halone, one of the 12, but all 12 are revered there. They're a church state, and they are not part of this Eorzean Grand Alliance, as you might have noticed. Because if you remember, you have to pick early on if you're going to be part of the Maelstrom, the Twin Adder, or Alamigo, which you can see, or not Alamigo, sorry, Immortal Flames. You can see these 3 icons in the map already that might look a little familiar. And then Ishgar's another one, which is not part of it. And the reason for that is because they've been busy fighting a war for 1,000 years with another nation called Dravania right there.
Wow, so they've just been busy this entire time up there?
Yes, they're fighting the Dragon Song War, is what it's called. And they've been fighting the dragons that live in Dravania. This is the nation of dragons for 1,000 years. That is why they are known as the Master Dragoons, which are dragon knights, which slay dragons.
That makes a lot of sense.
They don't like dragons. They hate dragons. If you're doing Dragoon, when you hit level 30 Lancer and you get your Dragoon quest, you're going to be taken to Korathos, which you're going to go into the snow and already start fighting little dragons. It just kicks right off with you fighting dragons. But south of that, we have Gridania. Gridania is an area also known as the Black Shroud. It is a city in the area called the Twelves Wood and led by a woman known as the Seed Seer. A race called the Pajal, or the Forest Children, are unique to Gridania and the Black Shroud. And they are a race of basically white mages. They're not technically white mages, they're conjurers, to be more technical, but they are connected to the elements of the earth, so they can speak to the planet and the forests.
Cool.
Very Zelda-y.
Yeah, I was about to say, you said you akin them to Kokiri before.
Yeah. They're not as childish, they're more like young adults. Some of them are direct children. The leader of Gridania, I think her name is Kanel Senna. She is she's the oldest one, and she looks like she's like 17.
She just looks like a young woman, yeah.
Yeah.
And she's old as shit.
That's where you start off if you're a Lancer, Archer, or Conjurer as well. And it's the forest starting area. Next, we're going to go to the west to the Isle of Vilbrand. And Lanaska is what it's most commonly known as, and its capital city of Limsa Laminsa. This is the island nation of pirates, where the biggest pirate crews united to stop the bloodshed between them and become more legitimate, and now they kind of protect traders and fishermen instead of pillaging people. If you're an Arcanist or a Marauder, you start here. If you want to unlock the Rogue class, starting at level 15, you also go here to do that. And that's pretty much all we need to know for that. The last of the main 3 is Ul'dah. Ul'dah is the city of merchants. It is where you start if you're a thaumaturge, a pugilist, or a gladiator. And this city is a sultanate And while they are called a sultanate and they have a leader who is a sultana, they're actually run by a merchant group known as a syndicate, which is formed of the most wealthy men and women of the city, and basically is controlled by gold. Is very corrupt. It is the only one of these three cities that this plot actually kind of takes place in, so you get to learn a lot more about Ul'dah as it goes.
I love it there personally.
Yeah, it's my favorite city. We've talked a lot about how it's got a fantastic music.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The last one for Eorzea is Alamigo. So Alamigo is another nation to the far east that is the border of the imperial land of Ilzabard, and it is known as an area also in Thanalan called Little Alamigo, which a lot of us have visited already. And what Alamigo is it is basically, it's where it was the military. It was like the biggest military force of all of Uldanard was controlled there. And unfortunately, the Empire decided to attack them, and Alamigo got destroyed. Alamigo wasn't able to beat them because their own internal strife. So this is actually controlled by the Empire at the start of the game. This is all Imperial land. And there's an area like right here that's a wall that separates the Empire from the rest of Eorzea. And you'll learn a lot more about Girabania, the area, and Alamigo as time goes on. And that's all we need to know for the world map. Another thing you can kind of tell as I zoom out all the way is it is very Earth-like. You can see there's Asia on the east.
Yeah.
Ilzabard's pretty much Europe, and Uldanard, Eorzea is like Africa. There's even a little island up here where the UK would be. But if you paid attention, I said 5 continents.
I did.
Not 3. And that's because there's 2 more, Mericidia and the New World. And we don't know almost anything about either of these locations. The New World is mentioned a little bit. It's very probably by its name and where it's not being shown on the map, the Americas. And you meet a couple characters from the New World in the Blue Mage questline, and they are wearing Native American-looking armor, like bone, like chest pieces, and like feathers and face paint and stuff like that, moccasins, that whole 9 yards. Really Mericidia, the other missing continent, is because we also know it's down in the south, is down here in this area, and it's supposed to be Australia. This area is in the lore, it has been around since ancient times. It was a land where man and dragon fought together under the protection of the elder dragon Bahamut. And that's all we know about it, really, except for some more history we're going to go into in the next part.
Don't tell the Dragoons.
No, don't tell the Dragoons about them. They might get upset.
Yeah.
And that's going to end the world map portion of this, so we can get that off the screen.
I enjoyed that.
Yeah, so that's the map.
I love that.
Now
it actually helps me understand a lot in terms of what I've seen in the game so far. Because, like, I've heard about the Empire, and I'm not going to spoil anything. I always heard about the Empire, but, like, if you paid attention to the map there, you would have seen that. It's just like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Because I remember, like, when I went to Gridania is when I was like, why the fuck am I seeing these Imperials pop up more often? It's like, because they're kind of on the border. Like, they're right there. Whereas, like, you know, when I was in Ul'dah doing my thing, they were talked about, but I never saw them.
Yeah.
It wasn't until, like,
Also in Stormblood and Shadowbringers, just for record, we hear a lot more about areas that are here. These, like, they're small nations the Empire has ruled over for a very long time, so it's kind of like we just don't know much about it yet. But I think in the next expansion, we're going to see a lot more about it, and I'm not going to say why. But I think
there's a bunch of subjugated nations.
Yeah, a bunch of subjugated nations, a bunch of subjugated different cultures, and you start to see more and more of these cultures arise as time goes on. But now we're going to go into the timeline. Earlier, I referenced Astral and Umbral eras. That is how they decide to divide the timeline. And each one of these eras is connected to an element and begins with the Umbral era and ends with the Astral era. And you're going to hear a lot of talk about these along with the word Calamity. And that is because the Calamity is what separates the eras, and that is what ties the element into everything. The best way to think about this is Astral eras are golden ages and Umbral eras are dark ages.
Okay.
Our star has gone through 6 eras, and we are now on the 7th. But before any of the eras was the creation. And I have an entire timeline that I have made up for this.
Wait, so how long does each era last?
It's different each time. It's not defined by year. It's defined by Calamity. So some are shorter than others. Some are very long. So this is by the beginning of the timeline. Creation's right there. all we know about the creation is this is when the 12 showed up. These 12 gods, I put in quotation marks, I don't actually know what they are said to have taken residence in Eorzea, and they established life and order. However, eventually, men, beastmen, and primals started showing up, and they started fighting each other. The 12 got so pissed off with this, they said enough, they huffed and puffed, blew it all away, and then all of a sudden we had our first calamity, which was the calamity of wind. And the first Umbral era began. So their leaving is described in the Encyclopedia Eorzea as the 12 left with such force that they blew away all the people of the world and caused the calamity of wind. I assume this means probably decades of such intense nonstop wind that just ripped the world apart.
That's great.
And that's the first ever calamity. So the first Umbral era we know absolutely nothing about. But the first Astral era we know absolutely nothing about. This was just like, I think it's just so Stone Age, it's just kind of irrelevant, you know?
Yeah.
And then eventually the skies turned solid black, and a lightning storm was just hitting the world so hard for so long that it caused the calamity of lightning, which started the second Umbral era. And this is when we start learning a little bit, where all of humanity was forced to live underground for an extended period of time. Obviously, it didn't cause enough to evolve the races differently, so I'm assuming it was like 100 years max. Probably they were underground. But what they did do during this time was they discovered magic. And the discovery of magic started the second Astral era. And people started rising up around the world with different kinds of magic, not really knowing what to do with them, but they were using them.
So it's like barbarian magic. Like.
Yeah, like simple, like, oh, I can fling fire, but it's causing problems I don't understand. And then basically the idea was, well, our fire is better than your ice, and they started causing holy wars. And these holy wars were extremely bloody. People started getting wiped out, and eventually it caused a massive timeline event, which was the calamity of fire.
Oof.
The entire world burned to a crisp, basically, because of uncontrollable magic being thrown around. So what that means exactly, I don't understand. We don't know more about it than that. I'm assuming it just was actual wildfires and infernos everywhere, burning down places.
Probably.
But out of the ashes comes our first big discussion of history, the Allagan Empire. So, known as Ancient Alag, or the Allagan Empire, it is a huge thing you're going to hear a lot about in the game. A lot of quests involve things about the Allagan Empire. And just to make a statement, there's 4 causes of all problems in the world, which is why we're going into this. Number 1 cause, the Empire that we talked about, the Garlean Empire.
Yeah.
Number 2, the Ancient Allagan Empire, things from that timeline having a problem. Number 3 is another historical event called the War of the Magi, and things from that coming back and haunting us. And then the 4th group of people called the Ascians, which we're going to talk only a little bit about at the end of all this. Because that's mostly spoilers to get any deeper into the Ascians.
Got it.
But at this time, the Allagan Empire was founded by a man known as Emperor Xande. I even have a picture of him here.
Oh.
There he is. Oh, that's not him. Wrong Emperor. There he is. Xande. Put it ahead of it. Put him up. There he is. There's Xande. So Xande founded the Empire, the Allagan Empire, and he was very powerful at magic. He was the first person probably ever to actually establish spells out of magic in a proper way, and with this, he was able to grow the Empire's power rapidly, and ended up spanning all 3 continents, probably the entire world, except for one, Mericidia, which we talked about before. So Mericidia, which I mentioned before, which is the people with, Australia and dragons being friends.
Yeah. So they couldn't.
Yeah, because they're under the power of the protection of Bahamut, the Allagan Empire couldn't defeat them, and he kept trying and trying, but eventually he would die before he would ever see success.
Wow.
And Xande passed away, and in the next centuries, they decided to stop attacking Mericidia and just focus on themselves, and which was great for them, because sure enough, when you're not fighting everybody, they actually had some great progress made, such as automatons, nanotechnology, and spacecraft were invented.
Jesus Christ.
So they were more advanced than anything ever. and they were able
Is this the astral era now?
Yeah, this is the third astral era that we're in right now.
Okay.
So we just moved into the astral era. The Allegan Empire is having a great time. They're traveling through space. They're making space stations. They're making floating cities that you'll find eventually. They have entire automatons, artificial intelligence, nanomedicine, and stuff like that. But the fate of all empires is that eventually they just grow stagnant. And it happened. They stopped making technological advances as fast. They stopped growing because they basically taken everything except Mericidia, and they didn't want to repeat the mistakes of their past. And we don't know actual numbers as to how long it's been since Xanday's death, but I think it's been at least like 400, 500 years.
Okay.
And then this guy shows up named Amon. He's a very fancy-looking boy, and what Amon is he is the royal magical scientist of the Allegan Empire. And he decides that the Empire needs to be glorious again, and it needs to be great. So what he does is this new technology called cloning. And with a piece of Xanday's DNA, he returns him to life. So Emperor Xanday comes back as a clone, and it was successful. And he comes back remembering everything, and kind of takes the throne again, takes the war of his empire. People just let him become emperor. There's no internal strife. They're like, oh, the emperor's back. Like, it's your throne kind of thing.
Jeez, okay.
So what do you think the first thing he did was?
Did he try to take that continent again?
Correct. With a full-out assault of spaceships and guns and orbital weapons, they got annihilated by Bahamut and lost the attack on Mericidia. So once again, now on an insane warpath, he keeps attacking and keeps losing because these Mericidians keep doing something. They keep getting crystals and summoning entities known as icons, which we now know as primals.
Got it. Okay.
Xanday couldn't handle this answer of losing, and so he set his mages on the job of figuring out how to deal with it. And to speed things up, he actually started killing mages who would fail experiments. Anytime they failed an experiment, they were dead. Next mage would have to come up and try to make a new one. I think Amon he's out of the picture at this point. I think he's either he wasn't killed, I don't think, but he wasn't part of this. Eventually they succeeded in making a technology that was able to capture the icons, or aka primals, inside of devices, keeping them alive in their physical form and using their aether to power their technology. So they started capturing gods and turning them into god batteries. And when they attacked Mericidia, and it worked, and they started capturing all these primals and putting them in batteries and making them power their technology. And this really pissed off this dude named Bahamut.
Yeah, I bet.
And he showed up and killed every single Allegan there.
Jeez.
And once again, Xanday went fucking ape. How can I lose? This is impossible. We just captured gods, and this fucking dragon shows up and kills us all. And he started researching himself into magic, thinking maybe I needed another way to do it. And he uncovers something called the Void. And this is a realm that mirrors ours, made of entire darkness, also known as the World of Darkness. Now, the World of Darkness is something you've already seen in game a little bit of, with these creatures called imps. The succubuses. They're known as the Void Sent, because they are creatures that are summoned from this void realm. And when he learned how to summon it, he went back to Mericidia, opened up a giant portal, and Mericidia finally fell.
Oof.
The army of demons were able to fight him, and Bahamut shows up, and they weaken Bahamut enough, and Xanday, instead of killing Bahamut, puts him into a god battery.
Oh.
So Bahamut gets imprisoned into a massive, and not just any god battery, he builds a massive orbital space station. And he puts Bahamut in it, and Bahamut is inside the space station getting powered by the sun and powering all of Allegan's technology from solar energy from space.
Jesus Christ.
And after this, he felt so successful that in the next couple years, he got so bored, and he got really into like reading nihilistic books or something. Because he reached out into the void and made a pact with a creature known as the Cloud of Darkness to attack all the creatures of Hydaelyn, all the people on the star, and kill them all, simply because he realized everything he built will eventually come to an end, and that was his only way to handle this reality. So this didn't sit well with the rest of the people, obviously, and they didn't listen to him, and a massive war was starting to break out, and so he said, fuck it, I'm going to channel this entire world of darkness into my crystal tower, which is like his throne, basically. Yeah. And I'm going to just fucking wipe the planet clean and summon her through this crystal tower. Turns out he wasn't as smart as he thought, and the crystal tower wasn't enough to hold back this energy. And so it caused a massive earthquake, which shattered the planet, causing the calamity of Earth and the beginning of the Fourth Umbral Era.
What an idiot!
So basically, he split the world into pieces.
So
and
the beginning of that guy. So did he first start rising to power in the third Umbral Era?
Correct.
Or did he? So he was at the beginning of the Umbral Era and at the end of the Astral Era.
Yeah, he was beginning of the third Umbral Era, rose to power, creating the third Astral Era, died naturally, got resurrected via cloning technology, and then caused the end of the Astral Era with the calamity of the Earth.
See, folks, that goes to tell you, you just like when somebody dies, leave them dead.
Yeah, it's a pretty common sentiment that brings someone back from the dead, especially maybe a power-hungry emperor.
Yeah, exactly. One who tried to attack a nation for decades.
I would love to know more about that because we just don't. But I would love to know, like, this guy was just like, I'm bored. We're so happy and peaceful, and all our people love us.
What was the other god's name again? Sorry, the one he put in a giant god battery?
Bahamut.
So is Bahamut still up in that space station?
I don't know. We'll talk about it. So the calamity of Earth happens, and the next phase, the Umbral Era, is ancient Alag completely collapsing. All organizations is gone. The Crystal Tower, which held their entire membership, is sunk underground, and everyone's basically dead. Who was in charge or dying, literally being suffocated underground in this fucking building. Its survivors are scrambling all over to survive the Void Scent, and this begins eventually. They start fighting the Void Scent off, and the Fourth Astral Era begins with the world only having a base level of technology kind of akin to the Bronze Age. Maybe the Dark Age, but they lost their magic. They don't know magic. They lost all their technology. So this is kind of like this Astral Era, quote unquote, is like a Greek post-apocalypse, basically.
So it's kind of like our Dark Ages.
Yeah, that was the height they got to, and they were starting to get better. But for reasons unknown, the world froze, causing the next calamity, a calamity of ice and an ice age, which froze the entire planet. The biggest important event of the Umbral Era of ice is that as it was before it thawed, many races from other continents were able to cross the sea that was frozen and come to Eorzea, such as the Makote, aka cat boys and cat girls. That's all we know about their origins. They're not from Eorzea, but they came during the Ice Age. And this eventually, the ice thawed. The Void Scent were pretty much gone at this point. And the Fourth Umbral Era is known to be pretty short, and the Astral Era began quickly when magic was rediscovered.
How did they rediscover magic?
Well, we don't know how exactly it was rediscovered, but we do know that it wasn't just rediscovered, it was mastered. Probably for the first time, by a great sorceress named Shantoto. She was a Lalafell, we know that, and she was the first black mage. And she created black magic, and she created being able to master fire, fire, lightning, and ice, and controlling it as best she could in offensive magic. Next thing that happened is she created a kingdom called Mach, and this is somewhere around southern Ishgard. We can actually bring the world map up for this, so we can look at it a little bit. Let's do that. So, zoom in here. So Mach was established somewhere around here. This area is where this kingdom called Mach was established, and they were the nation of black mages. To the west, in Gridania, almost in direct countership, a nation of Amdrapor was discovered somewhere around here, and they are the masters of white magic. And they were able to master that, which, we know as spells like Cure, and we know as spells like that. But an important thing to note is that earth magic, such as stone, and wind magic, such as arrow, are also white magic. And not to mention the spell Holy, which if you know Final Fantasy, you'll recognize that name. But if you don't, it is a white magic spell that basically disintegrates people with pure light.
Oh, okay.
So white magic is just as dangerous. And after Andropor was discovered, a third nation was discovered over here in Vilbrin, somewhere in here, called Nim. And Nim became the masters of what is known in Final Fantasy as green magic, but it's split up between multiple jobs in the Final Fantasy XIV, but it's basically protection magic.
Oh.
And they were using black magic to fight the void creatures, and eventually learned how to control the void creatures in Mach. So the black mages are now summoning and controlling void scent. And as you can imagine, that didn't sit well with the rest of the world. And an event started where the white mages of Amdropor and the black mages of Mach started battling each other in what is known as the War of the Magi. War of the Magi basically devastated the world by just massive magic being flung around and everywhere it was. And Nim said, you know what, we're chill. We don't want to be part of this conflict. And Mach, their neighbors across the water, was afraid that they might get convinced to join the Amdapor side and created something called the Green Plague, which transformed their people into monsters, a specific monster that I may have an entire emoji set about, and that ended Nim. They were gone. Nim was completely destroyed because they were all transformed into monsters.
Wait, no. But they were normal. They were just trying to hang out.
Yeah, they were chill. The black mages of Mach said, fuck you guys, you're out. And they were taken out. That was the first major casualty of the War of the Magi. And we mentioned that they're using magic, basically. Obviously, it's the War of the Magi. And that, as we mentioned before, uses ether. And this aether has to come from the planet. And so things are starting to get a little thrown off balance at this point, and the Maki needed a desperate win, so they reach into the void and summon the King of the Void, which sounds like a terrible idea, right?
It does sound like a terrible idea.
Well, you're right. It is a terrible idea. So this creature named Diabolo shows up, which, if you know Final Fantasy, he's like a recurring summon for the power of darkness. And Amdropor said, oh shit, this is going to be the next calamity. This motherfucker is going to cause a calamity of darkness. We need to stop him and seal him away. So they used all their magic they could, and they succeeded in sealing him into a device. What I'm not going to get into, that's another story for you to find out. But he gets sealed away, and what these Andropori do, they're like, thank God we stopped it. But they were, unfortunately, very wrong that they stopped a calamity, because if you paid attention, they were using white and black magic. Black magic, fire, lightning, and ice. White magic, earth, and arrow, being wind. So what does that leave?
The other one.
Water. The world was drained of everything but water, and water rose up and flooded the entire planet. There was so much water that the calamity of water was caused by massive floods from the War of the Magi. 6th Umbral Era sounds like a great time because people started picking themselves up by the bootstraps. They started controlling their magic a lot more. They were getting together. There was a lot less land in the world, a lot of flooded stuff, but they were able to still get together. The last of the Black Mages of Mach went to the south and found a city called Baladia, which would eventually be renamed as Ul'dah. The White Mages got together and made the forest city of Gridania. And the Black and White Mage quest lines talk a lot more about these. So if you want to learn all that history, you can do those. The nation that we know of during this time become established. I'm not going to go to Ishgard because that is huge spoilers as well. But Ishgard's established during this time. And so we're going to now switch our focus to this small little nation that was in the north called Garlemald. So Garlemald was founded by a race of men that has an organ called a third eye in their forehead. Now, you've seen this in game from the very first moment. You get to see a character named Nero, and he has a thing. You see his third eye, looks like a little rock in his forehead. Now, what this does, we're not entirely sure, but they have it, and what it does to their bodies is it stops them from being able to use magic. They're completely disconnected from Aether. They can't control it in any way. They can't use Aetherite to teleport around. and some disaster hit these people, and they had to keep moving north and more north until they eventually settled the city of Garlemald. 50 years later, 50 years prior to the events of Final Fantasy XIV, a man named Solus Zos Galvis took charge, and he discovered a resource called ceruleum. This looks like oil. It's kind of like a blue shiny oil, and it is able to create the technology known as Magitech.
Oh.
So their engineers were able to turn this into basically extremely advanced technology, and they were the only people able to control this, and their lack of Aether pretty much drove them into having to make up for it.
Yeah.
So this man, Solus Zos Galvis, was soon crowned by the people to become the first emperor of a new empire of Garlemald, and they used their Magitech engine to conquer the entirety of Ilzabard on land, and soon ruled over them. Under the guise of ending primals with dangerous religions, and my favorite, bringing in helpless savages to their people, decided to take over the continent of Othard, the Far East, and they succeeded in that, so it is fully under Empire control now. And then they had their sights set on the last place, which was Eorzea. And the connecting land was the area known as Alamigo. Alamigo had the biggest army in Eorzea, but their internal strife caused so much disorganization that they fell to the Empire 20 years before the start of Final Fantasy XIV. The people were forced to either serve the Empire or flee to become as refugees, mostly going to Ul'dah. Which when you start the game there, you'll see a lot of story about the refugees there. That's where they are. They're the Alamegan refugees, who have been living in rags basically for 20 years now. And that's the end of the timeline we have to cover. Timeline's done. We're caught up to Final Fantasy, but not quite caught up to Final Fantasy 14, because now we're caught up to Final Fantasy 14 1.0, which is part 5. And the final part of tonight's Lore Lords, which, to give a little bit of premise, if you don't know, Final Fantasy XIV is called A Realm Reborn in title. It's Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn. This is because it is patch 2.0 of Final Fantasy XIV, because the original game, 1.0, was horrible, failed, and was wiped clean.
Yep. And I love this story.
Yeah,
because you told me a little. You told me the short end.
Yeah, we're gonna get into what this actually is, because it is still part of the canon that 1.0 existed. It still did exist in the story. Its story is a prequel to the events of Final Fantasy XIV, which is also known as 2.0 or A Realm Reborn now. So before that, this is the story that would happen if you would have started the game back in 2012 when it first came out. And it begins, like most, as an adventurer on a cart going to become a great adventurer. But the reason why is told to you immediately. So monsters all around the planet are becoming more aggressive and physically larger, which is a problem. Also, the star's second moon, because our planet has 2 moons. There's the moon, and then Luna, the moon, and then Dalamud, the second moon, is glowing red and becoming bigger. And coinciding with this is the size of monsters increasing, as well as becoming more aggressive. Before too long in Ul'dah, a man shows up, a prophet by the name of Urianger, and he describes all these as symptoms of a coming 7th Umbral era, saying that a calamity of darkness is coming from the sky, and this makes him a wanted heretic by the Garlean Empire, and the people of Eorzea ignore his prophecy, as people do. But day by day, Dalamud's clearly moving closer to the planet now. People are realizing it's not just getting bigger, it's falling.
Majora's Mask style.
Yes, Majora's Mask style, exactly. This moon is about to fall on the planet. And as a result, 3 grand companies, the Immortal Flames, the Twin Adder, and the Maelstrom, have to team up with a company called the Garland Ironworks, as well as adventurers for hire to try to investigate what the hell is going on. Eventually, they discover the Empire has massive stores of ceruleum, that oil I mentioned before.
Yeah.
And they're all in Eorzea. And these ceruleum are found by the leader of the Garland Ironworks, an Imperial defector named Sid Garland. And he realizes, oh shit, the only reason this would be here is this is a project I heard about before I defected called Meteor. Now, if you know Final Fantasy, Meteor is a recurring subject of things falling from the sky. And this project in this game is to drop the meteor, Dalamud, onto the planet and destroy Eorzea because they're the ones summoning primals. And Garlemald's all about killing primals.
Yeah.
So this is a big issue, obviously,
Yes.
because the researchers learn another major thing by doing this, because they get into some Imperial records and find out a major issue with their entire life being a lie. Eorzea only has one moon.
Huh.
So Dalamod heading towards us is in fact, guess what? A massive orbital space station from the ancient Allagan Empire.
Oh my god, I called it.
So you might have heard about this before. We were just talking about it a minute ago, which, yes, is the same one holding the primal dragon god Bahamut inside. The Empire starts to build a base called Castrum Novum, I believe, and they start to attack Eorzea at this point, realizing that they have to kind of make their move now.
Yeah.
And they created a massive tower outside the Castrum known as the Lunar Tower, located in an area known now as Mordona. This tool was needed to control Dalamud's fall. Now, the companies got together, formed a group known as the Eorzean Alliance, and attacked Castrum Novum, which is the base defending the tower. The company, they took Sid's personal airship, the Enterprise, and sent a group of adventurers on it to a series of floating islands where their leader, Legatus Nail Van Darnus, was located. And these adventurers are the players, obviously, that you were playing as 1.0. And to kill him, which they succeed, Darnus gets killed, and he basically his death shuts down the whole lunar tower, and it collapses these floating islands because they were floating by ancient Allagan tech, which now all gets turned off.
Right.
They get saved from the falling islands by the Enterprise, and they have a huge celebration, end of Star Wars style, right? Like, we did it, the Empire's gone.
Yeah.
And this guy shows up, named Louis-Joie Leveilleur is his name, as I say, Louis-Joie Leveilleur. And he shows up to the Warrior of Light and says, "Hey, you notice that red moon's still falling?" So everyone kind of goes, "Oh shit, you're right, it is still falling," because it's just how gravity works.
Yeah, that's exactly true.
And so he says we have to, this is going to sound familiar, we have to summon the gods to catch it. So
wow.
Yeah, literally just like Majora's Mask. I'm assuming they just took inspiration from that plot too.
Honestly, at the point, yeah.
So he comes up with a plan to summon the 12 gods, the 12 that we talked about earlier, by traveling Eorzea and gathering their ancient symbols and summoning them with prayer to catch the moon. And Louis-Joie says this is going to be great, and then he introduces the Warrior of Light to a group known as the Circle of Knowing. And these are some scholars in the Kingdom of Charlet, and they're going to help him out. And there's one of them in the group tells him, one of the members of the Circle of Knowing, known as Thancred, tells the Warrior of Light that summoning one god, let alone 12 of them, is going to be enough aether drained from the planet, like summoning a primal, except it'd be like 100 primals.
Right.
So the Warrior of Light was now met with a decision of summoning these gods could destroy the planet and cause the calamity, but not summoning these gods could cause the moon to fall and cause the calamity. So he decides to at least try to summon the gods and see what happens, and goes off on a great adventure, which is most of the game. Now, a lot of shit happens during then, it's irrelevant, dungeons, whatever, but one important thing happens, which is a man shows up to meet the Warrior of Light, who's your player character, named Gaius Van Baelsar. Now, Gaius Van Baelsar, you've seen in game. We have a picture of him here. This is him. He is the leader of the 14th Legion, I believe it is, or 7th Legion, right. One of those two. And he is here, and he meets the Warrior of Light and tells him something, that the followers of that previous legate that they killed in the island believe he's still alive for some reason, and also told the Empire they succeeded in dropping the moon already, just so that they wouldn't look at him anymore, and they were going to do a full attack and drop the moon faster and just start wiping out people in vengeance of their dead legate who they think is alive. But Gaius warns the Warrior of Light. He says, "I'm not going to stop you. You need to stop the moon from falling because I want something worth conquering." So So Gaius doesn't want the world to explode, so he kind of helps the Warrior of Light come up with stuff. Oh, also this. This is Louis Joie. This is the guy who met the Warrior of Light and told them to save it. He's an old, dark-skinned elf man with white hair.
Cool.
Leader of the Circle of Knowing. The Warrior of Light eventually does gather all 12 symbols, heeding the warnings of Gaius, and the Circle of Knowing gathers people all together with another group known as the Path of 12, which are a group of merchants and adventurers based out of Ulda, who basically hold a lot of power, and they're able to gather all the people together to start praying to these gods so that they can show up with these symbols. And the 7th Legion meets in an area known as Cartano. And this is an area by Mordana, and the big battle finally breaks out. Dalamud, unfortunately, now enters the atmosphere, and unknowing to probably both sides, it is activated to open up at that time. And when it does, you know it, Bahamut shows up. Yep. And he's been out of the loop for quite some time and has absolutely no idea what's going on, and he is just an incarnate of rage at this point. And he starts blowing up almost the entirety of Eorzea. Cities are destroyed. He's just like dragoning all over the place. The battle, people are dying everywhere. And Louis Joie uses a spell at the last moment to protect the adventurers and the Circle of Knowing from getting destroyed. And then he starts to begin a ritual to put Bahamut back into Dalamud and send it back into space. Trying to avoid everything that's happening. Unfortunately, though, he cannot finish before Bahamut's fire hits him. And the last moment, he teleports away the adventurers and the Circle of Knowing. But, fortunately for him, the Path of 12, this other group, had gotten everyone around the planet to pray at the same time, channeling all their aether into Louis Joie, so he survives the hit from Bahamut. And he basically becomes living aether at the time, and punches Bahamut through the chest. So he's able to mortally wound Bahamut as he dies, sealing him back up inside Dalamud, which does land, but the blast basically stops it from having any kind of impact. It just kind of falls like an inch. Like, it's just kind of like he stops it from hitting. And also, his aether disperses all around the world and starts to heal some of the damage that Bahamut caused. However, this is still considered the sixth calamity. It doesn't have an element attached to it. It's generally just, I think it's just magic, because that's what Bahamut's element is, and he caused it. He's just the power of magic. So. And it starts the 7th Umbral Era, which is the beginning of Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn.
So we start off in the Dark Age.
You start off.
That makes sense.
Yes, you are in the 5 years into the Umbral Era.
Oof. Umbral Eras can last a long time.
And the rest of that's going to go on. But there's one last little thing I have for everybody to show.
Oh, yeah?
And this is something you probably haven't seen, because it's not part of the base starting screen of Final Fantasy XIV anymore, which is the Battle of Cartano in cinematic form.
Oh.
Because we can see all that, which we'll put on screen now, I believe. Show up? Yep, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to go to the main menu, and just to show you guys what you can do here at the main menu, there's a section called Movies and Titles. And if you click on this, you can go to all these different openings, and we're going to hit Realm Reborn. I think this is the one to show.
Okay. That's great. I'm going to listen to it.
So this opens up with Dalamud is falling. There it is. You can see it on screen now. Well, you'll see it a second later in delay. But this is not spoilers at all anyway. This is the opening for Realm Reborn. Bahamut's inside of that thing. And there it is opening up as it enters the atmosphere. And you can see there's Limsa Lominsa and pieces of it falling all over the place. There's Gridania.
Big, big bad. Big boom. And this is the war.
Yeah. Turn it. The music is so quiet. Turn it up. So this horned character here is the Warrior of Light. He's the main protagonist. He's going to be in every cinematic. He's us. That's actually our character fighting in the battle.
So this is supposed to be like the finale of 1.0.
Yep. This is the end of it all. So that's supposed to be the player's party. So they have like a black mage and a white mage healing them. There's Sid. You'll meet him soon in game. There's Dad. He's very mad.
I've been in here for thousands of fucking years. Like, the dragon has no idea what they're fighting over, and he just doesn't care. He's like, I don't care.
Yeah, he's just fucking... What the fuck? What is happening in this world? What is this world is basically what he's saying.
Yeah. Oh, Bartholomew. That's what I'm calling this god now.
Bahamut is like the main... he's always the big, big, big summon in all the Final Fantasy series. He's like the most powerful one.
Oh, so he's a common dragon?
Oh yeah, since the first game.
Oh, there he is. There's our shielding hero.
Yeah.
Damn, he's getting wrecked, but he's hanging in there.
So there's everyone praying. There's Papa Emo and Yida. There's Thancred. There's Y'shtola.
Oh, yeah. Give me your energy. This is Universe's 7 Spirit Bomb.
Basically, it's like pretty much what's happening. It's a spirit bomb situation.
Cool.
Shows those 12 sigils that the Warrior Light gathered. But unfortunately, Bahamut's stronger than that.
He's like, I don't give a fuck about this. Everyone's like, oh, it's over. Fuck.
And that's the end of the battle. The Warrior Light gets teleported away. Everyone moves apart. If you haven't seen this is the actual intro to Final Fantasy XIV, which is now showing 5 years later the start of Realm Reborn. The Warriors of Light got teleported away. And he spread his life around the world as he died and healed it, so people were able to kind of come back into existence. So while it isn't Umbral Era, it's probably the best off Umbral Era there's ever been.
Yeah, because there was there's a little bit of recoil there.
Yeah, it's borderline not an Umbral Era, and this is everyone kind of after the battle realizing that's where there's fireworks, like we survived. The world wasn't destroyed. You see your kids walking around. There's Yida and Papa Emo in the forest.
Yeah, like after all the calamities though, so like after every calamity was everybody wiped out and then just magically they came back?
No, it was never full, and it was never full extinction. There's always some people, like the people who survived the ancient Algod Empire were the people in that Bronze Age,
right? Okay.
Who they got together.
So they just tried to bring things back, but then
yeah. So this is probably the most survival rate of any calamity there's ever been. I don't know why it shows Odin. What was it even showing? Just a behemoth? Just Final Fantasy stuff, I guess.
Oh, fair.
There's the Crystal Tower that Xande built, his throne. It's a major story point.
Wow, he really fucked up, that guy.
Yeah. Big fuck up.
His big old, he was pretty arrogant there. Yeah, and you mentioned that Odin just shows up this is just a game mechanic that Odin shows up and kills you?
Yeah, you'll see a weather called tension. It looks foggy, and you'll see a red line through the tension on the little weather display, and it means Odin is in the area. And if Odin's in the area, you can engage him and fight him for get his horse as a mount.
Huh.
So another important thing to note is that if you played 1.0 and you started when you started 2.0, your character transferred over, and you had a different intro where you weren't on that cart, or you were on the cart going to the city, but you were already an established adventurer. You were level 1, but you were like people knew who you were, like you were the warrior of light already.
Oh, that's kind of cool. At least they do that for you.
Yeah, and when you meet someone like Thancred in game for the first time, he's like, "Oh, what are you doing here?" kind of thing. He's like, "I haven't seen you in years. Like, where have you been?" kind of thing.
Yeah, right. That's really cool.
So that was the relaunch.
Yeah.
And that's the end of everything I have, except one last note is that I mentioned 2 groups that were called the Path of Knowing and the Circle of Knowing and the Path of 12. These groups merged at the end and created one unified group called the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. So that's who they are. And their mission is to kill primals, and you'll meet them very early on if you're just starting. And that last bit that I mentioned is definitely the most important. The whole battle that ends the world with the dragon from space. Very important. I mentioned there was another group earlier called the Ascians. Now, the first Ascian you meet is one named La Habrea.
Oh, I remember him.
Yeah, you meet him around level 20-ish. You'll see them early on. It's not spoilery to say this. They are a group of black-robed people that wear masks. And you see throughout a couple points in people's memories that they maybe are orchestrating some of these events.
Yeah, that's what I have gathered.
And that's where we'll leave that for them. But that's the end of the Final Fantasy XIV lore going into it.
It's nice that we're coming off of a calamity, though, so theoretically speaking, we won't have another one in a long time, right?
Maybe the whole plot of this game is to stop it from happening.
Maybe the whole, an even worse calamity. It'll be the shortest Umbral and Astral era of all time.
It's very possible. A lot of bad things start happening very quickly. Yeah, that's basically everything. I'll go ahead and say that just so people are aware, the sources, I have 3 main sources of this video. One of them is, of course, Jesse Cox did an excellent video going into the Astral and Umbral era timeline a little more in depth than I did here. If you want to see that, it's on his channel on YouTube. It's an excellent video. That's where I got almost all my timeline information. Encyclopedia Eorzea is a book that they have. It's a physical book that is a super in-depth lore explanation to pretty much everything, which is where I got all my knowledge on the Aetherology, as well as a couple other YouTube videos I saw. And there's also another YouTube video. I'm going to say my third source is a compilation of like 15 videos of people explaining 1.0 in different ways and kind of coming to a coherent conclusion through all of that. most of the videos are so old from the launch of Realm Reborn, and they just haven't been updated. So it was really rough getting that story straight. But I did as best as I could, and that's it.
I mean, as somebody, I'm still really early on. I'm a level 35. You know what I mean, or 36 now. A monk, punchy boy. But it's nice to have like this kind of context of being like, no, like you were there in the fight, like
for all intents and purposes, you were there. They never talk about where your character comes from, which is something I will say is what makes Shadowbringers great. Is you may start to get some answers for that question.
Okay, so you actually find out
who you are and what you are, and it is crazy, and that's a lot to get into. That is heavy spoilers. We're not going to talk about that, but. For all intents and purposes, you were there at that battle. You fought in the war, and you were teleported away.
That's really cool. Yeah, because I'm trying to honestly, character building is kind of a big deal, and like for my character, I really haven't had. I have a cool name for my character, but I don't have like a lot of. I don't know what his personality is. I've really not established that. So like having all of this knowledge now and knowing where like. People really come from having a bigger world at large. It's more fun to kind of like world build a little bit bigger.
Your Final Fantasy protagonist personality is to tilt your head to the right and nod.
Yeah, and occasionally do a really really like half-ass smile.
Yeah, a smile, or when you put your fist in your hand to show that you're ready.
Or if I fist pump when I win.
And also so you are a silent protagonist in this game, but you do speak just via text. Your character is not voiced, which is probably one of my biggest gripes. I would love if you were voiced. I feel like I could bring a lot more to you, but they say that they want it to be your voice.
That's what they always said for Zelda too.
Yeah, Link. But unlike Link, you have a lot of lines. So you say quite a bit in this game. You answer a lot of questions. You have dialogue options.
I've noticed.
Yeah. And
I love that because again it helps me understand even like things a little bit more. Like it sounded too that Ul'dah has been an important city for quite a while. Like,
Ul'dah was founded by the first black mages from the War of the Magi. Yeah, so it's they are. If you play black mage, you will learn a lot more about Shantoto, the level black mage I mentioned, and you will learn a lot more about the War of the Magi. Through that, and while I may have painted the black mages as a very bad picture, they are not that bad. Also, you will learn through the black mage quest line that black mage is an illegal art in Eorzea.
Probably because of the history.
Yes, 100% because of that. And the opposite end, the white mage storyline, you learn a little bit about Amdapor, not a lot. It doesn't really focus on Amdapor as much as the black mages focus on Mach, but you learn a little bit about it, and you do learn that you're the only white mage. That's the lore of being the white mage. It's such a forgotten. It's the magic is so powerful and hard to obtain that you're basically the only one able to master it because you're the warrior of light. So.
Fair. You and everybody else who decided to go white mage.
You and those other adventurers who you also see in the world.
Hey, but you know what? That just means that white mages are coming back, baby.
And,
that's all.
I'm just going to go ahead and say that in Shadowbringers, there's a little bit of explanation to those other adventurers in the world.
Oh, do they justify it better?
Yes, they do, and it's kind of metal. But that's for you to find out. Just a little. Realm Reborn is a story of your character fighting the Empire. Basically, that's the plot, I would say. Heaven's Ward, you're going to learn a lot more about Ishgard that I brought up in the Dragons. It's 100% about that. What's after that? Stormblood, you learn a lot about Alamigo and the Empire and the Far East. And then in Shadowbringers, I'm not going to say anything.
I know nothing about Shadowbringers. I accidentally watched the opening thing, but I didn't understand what was going on.
Yeah, I would try to avoid from watching that as much as you could going forward because you start to understand more and more, and that is a huge spoiler cinematic.
Yeah, now I probably would understand.
Also, a great thing that I recommend doing is like when you beat a Realm Reborn, like if you're like on stream, for example, watch the Heavensward trailer after. Go to the movies and watch the trailer for Heavensward. Only once you start Heavensward, because it does show the end of Final Fantasy XIV Realm Reborn in the trailer.
Okay, so got it.
Yeah, so finish that. Watch this Heavensward trailer. When you finish Heavensward, watch the Stormblood trailer. And same with Shadowbringers. Watch the trailers because it really they actually show things that are like...
Yeah.
not only get you super hyped and emotional about what's about to happen, but they kind of show things going on.
Yeah, okay. Because I don't know where exactly I am in the storyline, but I'm like, I feel like I'm way more deep in it now. Like I'm dealing with. I'm not gonna spoil anything. Don't worry. But like where I am, I'm like, okay, like any MMO or RPG for that matter, I'm done with the build a reputation part of the game. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you're starting to enter the actual plot. MJ asks in chat, maybe I missed it, was there anything about blue magic? So, blue mages are not a real job in this game, if you don't know. They're what's called the game's only adventuring job. They said more might come, but if that's true, it's not happening in this expansion. What blue mages do is, blue magic is the art of monster magic, which is learning the magic from monsters, where you get hit by their attacks, and now you can do their attacks. And in the Blue Mage storyline, the way it's explained is it is the art of magic from the New World.
Oh!
So this continent that we don't know anything about, that's from everything we know, is North America, Native American inspired. They are the Blue Mages.
That's really cool. So it's very, very mysterious.
Yes, we know almost nothing about it, and it's used in-game through the story to establish basically a theater group of people using crazy magics and Coliseum fights against monsters using crazy magics. It's fun. They're fun to play as. I wish they were a real job because I love blue mages. I would love to I would probably be a blue mage main if they were a real job.
But you can learn it though.
Yeah, you can become a blue mage, and what you can do with it basically is they have a quest. They have a Coliseum you can fight in to get unique mounts and pets you can only get through them. They have a bunch. You can farm dungeons and raids and stuff, like lower level stuff, really easily because they're extremely overpowered, which is why they're not a job. Because you can go, like, for example, fight the final boss of A Realm Reborn and learn his spell because he hits you with it, and then you can go use it. So like they're meant for like being able to just do crazy stuff like that.
That's really cool. Man, that's gonna be so cool. I'm glad that they have like, blue mages are just kind of some random thing, but they might justify it with if we eventually go to the New World and actually see, you know.
Oh yeah, which I'm sure we're going to. So here's a thing to talk about also, which I can say, which is spoiler free. A Realm Reborn to Endwalker. It's called Endwalker because it's the end of the story. The story is officially coming to an end. To clarify what that means is Final Fantasy XIV is not ending, and the story mode is not ending, but the arc that we have started from 1.0 all the way to Endwalker has been one solid story, and it's wrapping up. So moving on past Endwalker, they said they said the first patch after Endwalker is the beginning of the next story arc for the Warrior of Light.
Damn.
And the Scions of the Seventh Dawn.
Whoever's left, I have no idea if anybody dies, by the way. That is spoiler free because I don't actually know.
Yeah. Not going to say anything about deaths.
Obviously. But, man, that is pretty wild. That's exciting. That is really cool. And it definitely makes it more exciting to play more Final Fantasy. So, but thanks to everybody for listening to this episode 6 of Lore Lords Live. And again, we'll be getting them edited. I've already started putting them together a little bit. So we'll be getting some actual, if you want to go back and listen to any previous episodes about Zelda or Dragon Ball Z or Omseti, you will be able to do that soon. And you can also do it right now on Atlas's channel.
Yeah, if you check my VODs, they'll be there. They're all there still. Soon they'll be disappearing into the VOD void, but then we'll have actual recordings of them.
We will.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks everyone for listening.
This was wonderful.
This was Lore Lords on twitch.tv/Atlas669.
Yeah. And I hope y'all play Final Fantasy XIV with us.
Join us. Server Primal, Data Center Primal, Server Leviathan. Join us up.
All right. Thanks again, guys.
Yep. That's it.